All right, Ike, in the news this week, I'm sure you've seen it as you are the founding member of the Ineos Grenadier fan club here in the United States, that they have finally released the highly detailed photos of the interior of what looks like a German anti-aircraft missile battery from the 1970s. What do you think? What do you think of the airplane, like the military, like however you want to describe it, interior?
Well, I don't know that there are any U.S. fan club members because, well, I don't think this is a vehicle that's going to come to the United States, more than likely.
Well, that's why the fan club is so important. It's important to show that support, and I think they appreciate. I think what is the owner's name? Daniel Radcliffe. I think is a big. He's a big fan of yours specifically, and the work you're doing with the club. I think is very important.
Who isn't? So I think for all kidding aside, I think the interior of this Land Rover reminds me of the retro radios that they used to sell at the Sharper Image back in the 90s or early 2000s, with the little switch guards and sort of the purposefully clunky switches and retro looking switchgear. I think it had kind of that feel to it. I think it was generally more appealing than I thought it would be. I think it still has that kind of like Eastern European sort of Slovakian Land Rover knockoff. Like, you've probably seen the Iveco Massif.
Yeah, who hasn't?
Which is like a Land Rover knockoff, or the Santana PS.
Well, I was going to say
series.
That's the one that it looks. I feel like from the front, the most. It looks the most like the Santana air quotes Defender. I think that's where they kind of the hood shape, the way that it has the two lights with the smaller two lights in the grill. Which is also, I think, something that the Con automotive guys do, is the lights in the grill. I know you're a big fan. It does look a little body kit in some ways. I
think generally it's good, and Magna Steyr, who I think they've partnered with to do a lot of the suspension and running gear stuff. Big fan of the classic Steyr-Puch products, the Pinzgauer, the Haflinger, that sort of thing. So,
well, and that's that engineering base is the same thing that gave a rise to the Geländewagen as well. Essentially, it's the same group that designed the underpinnings of the Geländewagen. And actually, the funny thing is, I felt like this feels even more Geländewagen-y now on the inside. Not just the outside, but on the inside with the Recaro seats and stuff, and with the saddle leather steering wheel and some other things like that. It's starting to feel, I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's really cool that they're doing something that is just totally out of what you would expect from what will probably be pretty expensive kind of luxury SUV. I'm not sure how many Red Cross workers and things will be driving those things around Africa, quite frankly, because you can get a Toyota Land Cruiser for probably 1/10 the price of that car. But it's neat. I don't know. I think it's kind of cool.
No, I agree. It definitely has some cool elements, and kudos to them for trying to make something that they think is more in keeping with the traditional Land Rover ideals, whatever that is. It's kind of subjective. There are a few things that I think it resembles. It kind of looks like a cross between an Isuzu Trooper and a Geländewagen. With that kind of that 30% rear door situation. The 2/3 on one side, 1/3 on the other. Kind of has that Trooper-esque proportion to it, and then definitely some sort of German influence to the body. The doors sound like they're solid and close nice. I like the little toot on the horn, on the two little toot horn button. I think that was probably my favorite part, is the little toot horn button. It's for when you want to do a friendly honk. For those of you that haven't seen it, and it actually says toot on the button.
Toot on it.
Yeah,
which I mean, being having a 6-year-old at home, we're talking about toots constantly. I mean, it's an almost constant dialogue. So I haven't shown her the toot button on the horn yet, or on the steering wheel yet, but I can only imagine how she will delight with. And it also looks like it could be a grenade launcher button. Like it's a big red button.
It is.
And otherwise,
it looks pretty serious.
It's like,
yeah, you like launching the smoke grenades, or
I think you first have to flip a couple toggle switches overhead to deploy the grenade launcher, and then you can actually press the button to actually fire them.
The friendly horn. Yeah. So for those of you that haven't seen it, there's a large horn press in the center for like apparently an angry or a serious honk, and then there's a tiny little toot button on the steering wheel.
It's wonderful. It's just so great.
Ridiculous, but I love it. I love it. That is definitely my favorite part. And we should probably note that the interior did feature locking differential switches.
Yeah.
And it also featured auxiliary switches that you can add, various electrical accessories to, so that you don't have to butcher up your dashboard with all kinds of things.
I think that's cool. And obviously people are going to buy something like that, and they're going to put auxiliary lights on it. They're going to put light bars and possibly winches and things like that. So having that stuff pre-wired, and I like that the buttons themselves are actually labeled with the amperage that particular circuit is wired to do, which is kind of neat. I don't know how much of that stuff is just the sort of prototype interior, but the fact that they come off with sort of 4 Allen screws like you would in the dashboard. It's not called a dashboard in an airplane. I can't remember what they call it, but in the instrument cluster of an airplane, where you have almost kind of rack rails inside of an airplane, right, where you can put all your stuff and lay it out however you want, and if it's right hand seat or left hand, whatever, you can kind of lay it out. This sort of evokes that, but I don't know, like there's that giant Grenadier panel overhead. I don't know if like that comes out and you can put in like 3 more rows of toggle switches for whatever it is that for all of your anti-aircraft
different horns.
Yeah, different horns. A variety of toots that you can pre-equip.
One thing that I thought was interesting that they mentioned at least twice in the video was that this car would be warm and dry. They mentioned that at least twice. And so we decided for that reason it could not be the successor to the Classic Defender.
Yeah, it's exactly right. If you own a Classic Defender or have spent any significant amount of time in them, the 2 things you would never describe it as are warm or dry, unless you are in a warm and dry place, in which case it is those things to excess. It is those things to the point of
it's parched.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's an arid wasteland in there when it's hot. So yeah. Anyways, I like the Grenadier. I would probably consider membership in your club as details of that emerge, depending on what kind of merch
you were going to make the patches, weren't you?
Yeah, we'll get some of that stuff going. The nice thing about the patches is that they're held onto your clothes with 4 small Allen screws in each corner. And so if you needed to remove the patch so it's a great feature. Anyway, so moving on to Britain's top model for this week, sort of keeping in theme, actually, if you will, of our maybe overly tactical vehicles, a super classic, iconic Land Rover, the Tomb Raider Defender from the 2005 Tomb Raider film with Angelina Jolie. And it was a Defender 110 high cap. The interesting thing about it is that it was outfitted and sort of built by Land Rover Special Vehicles. So
that's not what I heard. I think I heard that they told a focus group of 12-year-old boys to design this vehicle. They were like, look, we're going to do this Tomb Raider car. We're going to have this buxom Indiana Jones character driving what vehicle is she going to drive?
Right.
And this is what they came up with.
This is a combine of like 12-year-old boys drawing what the Tomb Raider car should be. And you know what? They nailed it. It has more searchlights than maybe any other vehicle ever made. It has a roll cage. It has a checker plate like it was going out of style. Of course, you have to have a woven recovery rope draped over the front of the car, as well as this has a Husky winch on it, Camel Trophy style Husky winch, and then like what seems like the thing that holds copper tubing and things. If you're a plumber, sort of down one side
tubes.
of it,
it's just a tube.
You got tubes.
So could be a rocket launcher.
Oh yeah.
Could be deploying various gear, smoke grenades, whatever.
Could just be a beach umbrella. There's no way to know.
Could be
one of those trail showers. You
never know.
Those are popular. And then, of course, I think my favorite, and there's so many things, it's hard to pick a favorite thing on this particular car. And if you happen to be in Mother England and wanted to go check this out, it actually lives, I believe it might be owned by the Dunsfold collection, but we can confirm that. But it is definitely at the British Heritage Museum, the British Motor Heritage Museum. Last time I was there, it was there. It's neat to see in person. But I think my favorite item is it has a tiny, tiny little rear tub Land Rover badge in the top middle of the roof rack where the Camel Trophy plaque would go on a Camel Trophy car. There's a teeny, tiny little Land Rover symbol there between the set of 4 Land Rover branded off-road lights.
Seems comically undersized considering they're building this like a chunky vehicle. For those that that haven't seen it, this is based on a Defender high capacity 110 wheelbase pickup truck, and it has roll cages and it has all kinds of accessories and accoutrements to make it look like it's in a video game. I mean, it's basically a video game movie. Yeah. The video game was very popular among 12-year-old boys worldwide. So this vehicle, it has a V8 engine probably, I think. I can't remember.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does.
And so they had a they had a Tomb Raider edition, I think, that they made.
They did, that's
right.
And
so they offered a special edition of this car, and it kind of gave rise to or popularize the tactical Land Rover, aesthetic movement. So all of the, twisted automotive and the Bond 110s that came after that, they kind of all, in a certain sense, pay homage to this vehicle, at least aesthetically. And
if you wanted to attach a rifle scope to sort of any surface on your car, this would be the motif they're going for. It's got a tiny little trailer hitch mounted winch. It's got a fuel can, of course, it has to have a fuel can mounted to the back of it. And then if memory serves, when I saw it at the Heritage Museum, first of all, I believe it's sitting next to a Judge Dredd 101. Which, as you know, my favorite car. It was sort of covered in camo net, like in the bed was all covered in camo net and stuff as well, to just enhance what is already a fairly douchey setup. And then I think there's like a scuba tank on the roof. There's just any kind of nonsense that seemingly was laying around.
It's a theme park car. It's like what you would see at Disneyland or something like that. It's just totally over the top. Ridiculous.
It feels very Jurassic Parky, like the Mercedes.
But it is. I concede that it is incredibly influential among a segment of Land Rover enthusiasts who want an AR-15 embodied as a vehicle
car. Yes, exactly. And as you mentioned, like the Tomb Raider edition. In fact, what makes it the Tomb Raider edition is a ton of checker plating along the side of the car.
A ton of checker plating.
In addition to a roof rack and lights, there's a sort of L-shaped piece of checker plating along the side, and then there's some sort of course, up on top of the wings, some checker plating and some stuff like that. But I think what really sells the Tomb Raider car is an excess of checker plating.
Well, and I should say that I am incredibly biased against checker plate, unreasonably so.
Yeah,
because I grew up in the Midwest, and the Midwest is part of the Salt Belt here in the United States, and the vehicles there rust very badly. And so all of the four-wheel drive vehicles that had giant rust holes in them, people had covered those rust holes in checker plate. So one of the things, if you were to go look at buying a vintage four-wheel drive vehicle that you wanted to avoid, if it was a Land Cruiser or Jeep or Land Rover or whatever, it was avoid cars that have checker plate in it because it's covering up rust or dents or whatever, because it's way cheaper to cover that up with checker plate than it is to actually repair it properly. So I have this like mental block as far as checker plate is concerned. I just can't handle it.
Yeah.
I recognize that's an unreasonable prejudice for a lot of people, but I still can't get past it. I don't like it at all.
They really love their checker plate.
They love it. And speaking of covering things up, we have a Rover faux pas this week. What is it?
Well, Ike, I know how there's such a long list of Land Rover faux pas that we're working through. There seems to be no limit. This one is probably conjointly one of my least favorite things that people seem to do. Again, I think checker plating goes hand in hand with spray on bed liner everywhere on a car.
Boy, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It is the popcorn ceiling of automotive coatings. It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. It covers up all ills. Anytime that you got some kind of ugly paint or ugliness, people want to put the bed liner in it and then tell you it's, for abrasion resistance or it's for, glare resistance. So you're going to do the hood or you do the inside of the footwells or whatever they're going to do. Yeah. That's the reasoning behind the bed liner. It's a non slip surface, as if there's a lot of slipping going on in the back of the vehicle or in the front of the vehicle. But I think on the hood. But there are a lot of bed liners out there, and some of them they kind of range from like almost a rubbery, smooth, bumpy to almost like an aggressive, like it's like sand and
almost
paint.
Like
it's
sand, like a grip tape or something.
You could actually scrape your skin on this. So it kind of runs the gamut. But I think what they all have in common is they're hideous.
Oh yeah, they're hideous and used inappropriately. I'll tell you this much: I have spray and bed liner sprayed into the bed of my truck, where spray and bed liner belongs. That's its home.
It kind of makes sense there.
That's where it wants to be. Anywhere else, you start to stretch that. And I have seen someone who remained nameless, what I can only describe as pink. I think the goal was red, but the result was pink. Land Rover, Rhino lined, which is a brand name, especially in Canada. I guess it's here too, but Rhino lined front to back. No paint on the car.
Brutal.
Just Rhino liner. Just went just front to back. And probably my favorite feature of that car is the razor blade cuts along the door seams to be able to open the doors, because the Rhino lining was just a single action where the door handles were Rhino lined over. I believe they masked the windows off. I don't know that, but I believe they did, because you could see through the windows.
Brutal.
Literally everything else Rhino lined from front to back in a beautiful Pepto-Bismol pink, which is really, it's a great
it has all the appeal of lumpy thighs, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
It just really is unpleasant. I think my objections stem from not just the appearance, though. It makes the vehicle heavy.
Yeah.
It makes the vehicle harder to clean. It makes if you do the floors, it's often over the hardware, so it's like almost impossible to remove the floors.
Yeah.
Anytime a vehicle comes in for service or work and it has bed liner on it or around it or near it, it's unpleasant.
Yeah, it is. It's an awful surface. I'll tell you though, like the tool mounts, my NATO tool mounts on my Defender, those brackets are all Rhino lined. Just
to grip the tools better.
Yeah,
it's too late. It's too late. It's too late. No. I think that this is an unfortunate product of the 1990s. People were like, "Oh, I'm gonna bedline my pickup." Well, why don't I just bedline the whole thing? Because it's way easier than preparing a painted surface and painting it nicely in a smooth, easy to clean finish.
I think it comes from the school of thought of, why don't they just make the entire plane out of the black box material and then we'll be fine? I think the same folks that ask that question are probably driving around in a pink Land Rover, rhino lined from front to back. I think that's
man. I just feel like there's so many bedlined vehicles from the 90s that it is,
It's fallen out of favor lately. I think when people realize they could plasti dip things or wrap things, I think
it's temporary.
People have now, I've seen far more, especially this seems to be more prevalent for discoveries, where somebody has a discovery with just an insanely bad paint job, a really old paint, whatever, right? And they'll have that sucker wrapped. And they actually look quite good. They look fine. And that is temporary. If the next owner or someone, you need to replace a panel, you need to do work on the car, you can get the wrap redone, you can salvage it in a way, that seems a little more reasonable than if you've Linexed the hell out of something, then, good luck. Also, good luck matching that pink color again. Those things are pretty much hand mixed. I'm just saying, the guy who's doing the truck bedliner spray-in, probably not a color scientist. I bet that you're going to get sort of, I don't know. It's hard enough to get a panel painted the same color with actual people who paint cars for a living. That's very difficult, and they don't like doing it. I don't think the Linex guy is paying quite that much attention. It's sort of, it's black normally, so anything outside of that, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about something that we do like, which is a show that is available on the YouTube.
It sure is. It is on the tube of you.
Yes. A classic Australian program.
Yeah, Land Rovers in the movies this week. It is not just a Land Rover playing an inconsequential role in a film, rather a Land Rover that I think contributes to the general oeuvre, if you will, of an individual. Of course, that individual is Bush Tucker Man.
Bush Tucker Man is wonderful.
Oh my God, it's the greatest thing. And I know we have quite a few people who listen from Australia, a couple of patrons who sponsor us on the old Patreon from Australia. And I can only imagine that, we have some stuff in Canada sort of like this, where, there's some iconic individuals that sort of, scratch the surface of what the Bush Tucker Man kind of is. But I can only imagine what a cultural phenomenon the Bush Tucker Man is in Australia. But certainly you got to go on YouTube. You got to look up the videos if you haven't seen them, and hopefully you have. It's amazing.
Well, for those of you that haven't, you might describe it as sort of he's a survivalist type of character, but he talks about a lot of, natural history and indigenous culture and indigenous ways of living and surviving. And he basically travels around in a Land Rover, sometimes with a trailer, sometimes without a trailer. Yeah. And he talks about, his trips and the places he's in. And it's fascinating, but also pretty educational, and he's quite the character. So he catches critters and he cooks them and he does all kinds of various things, and it's from a period before Steve Irwin and Bear Grylls and some of these other celebrity animal handlers and survivalists, and so it has sort of a, I mean, it's maybe unfair to say, but it has more of a genuine quality to it. Like, he's not doing that stuff purely for entertainment value. You feel like it's a little bit more legitimate. I don't know. Is that your takeaway?
Oh yeah. And some of the, I mean, you know, he definitely has this sort of like just sort of giver approach to off-road driving, where that Land Rover has, I mean, at least once an episode, there's something where, you know, it gets air, it's almost rolling over. There's, you know, there's plenty of this sort of Australian spirit that runs, you know, very fluidly throughout. I think my favorite character in the whole show may be his absolutely inconceivable hat. I think the shape of that hat, the bash, if you will, if you're into the conservation of hats, the bash of that particular hat is just insane. Like I'm not sure what the purpose is. The shape is amazing, extremely iconic, somewhere between a turn of the century witch and the Pied Piper. It's just an incredible hat.
It's an amazing affectation, no doubt.
Yeah. And I think he, you know, I mean, obviously a cultural icon in Australia, but the fact that I don't know, but a good portion of his catalog, I spent no less than 2 hours the other night watching Bush Tucker Man videos on YouTube, and you really can't find an end to it. I mean, I every corner I turn around, someone else is sharing some kind of, you know, there's, I'm sure, huge rights issues there, but that's for another time. But you can get to all of his stuff, or at least a very good portion of it, really get a great flavor for it. And they're thoroughly enjoyable, really good stuff. And yeah, he kind of invented the khaki shorts and socks that go just below your knees.
I don't know if he invented that. I don't know if he invented that, but if you've ever seen the Monty Python skit where it's the Australians and every Australian in the skit is named Bruce.
Yeah.
He does kind of typify that a little bit, but it's super wonderful, and everybody should check it out.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely worth a watch. Super fun. So lastly, Ike, I know for a fact that you are dealing with some extreme temperatures up in your neck of the woods. And that's why you're not in your workshop, but instead in a place with air conditioning. And we here in Southern California are also dealing with insanely high temperatures. So we thought it might be a good idea to do a Tip Top Tech Tip Heat Dome edition around keeping your Series Land Rover nice and cool.
Yeah, you know, Steve and I talked about this before the show, and we decided that we should focus on Series Land Rovers because it is not possible to keep the coil-sprung Range Rover, Defender, and Discovery vehicles cool, especially if a Disco 2. You think it came from the factory overheated.
That's right. That's exactly
and
right.
overheating.
They run hot. Those Bosch motors are insane.
They just run too hot.
But nuts.
But you can keep your Series Land Rover cool, and we should talk a little bit about how best to do that. So temperatures have been warm here in Oregon. Fortunately, this week they're cooling off, but I've been getting a lot of phone calls for cooling system parts, and you know, people asking, how do I keep my Land Rover running a little cooler? And so I think one of the things that's frequently overlooked on Series Land Rovers is you know, making sure that the cooling system is complete. You know, frequently the cooling system on these older vehicles are missing important components that helps it cool better. You know, oftentimes the radiator comes out for a repair or a replacement, and the fan shroud does not go back in. And the fan shroud is a really important piece of the cooling system, and it directs and makes the fan much more efficient at drawing air through the radiator and therefore cooling the engine. You know, if you've ever used a vacuum cleaner and you take the attachment off, it's much less powerful than when you put the attachment on and it focuses or draws air through a smaller area. And the same thing is true with the fan shroud. And the Series Land Rovers definitely benefit from having their fan shrouds in place and the fan shroud extension, which is often missing from those. The other thing I think people often overlook is the thermostat. You know, if you asked 10 Land Rover owners what temperature their thermostat was, 9 of them would tell you they have no idea. They've never removed it. And the thermostat is one of those pieces that when these cars were new, it was often considered to be a seasonal replacement. You had a winter thermostat and a summer thermostat, and so the engine would run at a different temperature. It was often desirable to run it at a different temperature depending on the exterior temperature. So Land Rover Series thermostats, I think, come in 3 or 4 different temperature. 77 degrees Celsius is really common. 82 and 88, I think, are the most common. 88 is hard to get anymore, but the 77, I think you can get a 72. So 72, 77, 82 and 88 were the original denominations, I guess.
Denominations of well, and thermostats are one of those things where people will leave a thermostat in a car forever. It maybe has come with that thermostat, and thermostat, the heat conductive wire that makes them expand and contract, the little valve that makes it work, wears out, and they wear out actually, I think, quicker than people realize. They're not good, especially where I'm from in Canada. Really, really, really cold conditions, and leaving the car out overnight in really cold conditions doesn't do great things for that thermostat. Remember, it's immersed in a very cold liquid, something that's being kept from freezing in many cases by the antifreeze that's in the cooling system. So, that little heat reactive spring is getting the crap beaten out of it as it's going super cold, and then it's being heated up to engine temperature, and then it's getting super cold again, and then it's heating up to engine temperature. I imagine it's a little milder on them in climates that don't get super cold, so you don't have to replace them as frequently, but still, it is an insignificantly expensive part. And crazily enough, in series motors, it's really easy to replace. You lose a little coolant replacing it, but it's super easy. The Defender is hard because you have to, the trick is you use gasket sealant to kind of glue it in so that it doesn't fall off when you're trying to put the housing back together. But the Series Land Rover, it drops straight down into the little, the beautiful little, thermostat housing. And it's very easy. It's very quick. And it's not, you lose only a tiny bit of coolant. It's really easy to do. Fun.
Yeah, it is a critical part to the cooling system. It's essentially the valve that opens and closes the cooling system, and so it needs to be functional, and it needs to be you need to use one that is appropriate for the exterior temperatures that you're expecting to see. So if you put an 88 degree thermostat in the car, or it has an 88 degree thermostat, and it's the summer, it's going to run hot, especially if it doesn't have a fan shroud, or if the radiator isn't, appropriate capacity, which is another issue that these cars are having. The original radiators are, they really have extra capacity. They're almost overcooled. They have, at least on the early cars, a 5-core or 5-row radiator. And a lot of times, as soon as those have a leak, those brass and copper radiators have a leak, people replace them with a Chinese aftermarket 3-core radiator that is not made of the same quality as the original. Now, I understand that radiator shops are harder to find good ones, and radiator cores are much more expensive than the aftermarket ones. So it's really common for owners to be like, new Chinese radiator is $300 and it costs, $700 to recore my original. Well, the original one lasted, 60 years, something like that. So you got to amortize it over the number of years that, the vehicle is going to still exist. And, it's definitely worthwhile to put the 5-core radiators back in them. They're extremely, extremely durable. They're repairable, and they just last a really long time. The other thing that can happen is that people don't maintain the coolant, and so the water that people put in them starts to corrode the interior of the engine block, and then that corrosion turns into, clogs throughout the cooling system, throughout the small ports in the radiator and heater core. And so that can really, really reduce the effectiveness of the cooling system. And these are all things that you can, mostly check with very little expense and effort. So if your car is overheating, it's really easy to get one of those infrared thermometers. It's like $20 at most auto parts stores, and you can kind of check and see if the thermostat's opening. You can check and see if the radiator has cores or rows that are blocked with that thermostat, or I'm sorry, that thermometer, infrared thermometer. So if your car's having cooling problems, it's easy to just look around on the cooling system and figure out, hey, where's the problem? And
it's something that I travel with in the certainly the Defender, because again, it's a V8 coil sprung Land Rover, so it comes from the factory operating at 210 degrees. Now, I run oil-based coolant in the Defender because we spend a lot of time doing, very hot desert driving, and the idea of having
that way when there's a head gasket leak, it still lubricates the engine.
It's fine.
Too.
It's still, it's all just one closed system then. I just decided to just put oil in the radiator because it's going to end up in there anyways. Why not just start the party early? So, that way at least it can't boil over, and it will keep, it'll keep the cylinders cool enough that the engine won't seize in the middle of the desert when you would die if it did. Not to say that just because you can run that coolant to 240 degrees that you should be running your aluminum blocked Land Rover at anything over 210, and even long periods of time at 210 is really not good for it. So good to try to keep that cool. And there are things you can do to the V8 motors, and it's a whole, there's an entire world of people that will tell you that they have a solution to that problem. But I think another thing is the gauge in either your multi-gauge cluster in your series car, or potentially the standalone gauge in your Defender, may be lying to you. Either the sender, either the temperature sender, which for some reason I have a temperature sender from a stage 1 right here on my desk, but the temperature sender itself, this the little brass jobby that sends out voltage, and it's just that. I mean, it gets corroded, it gets calcified from whatever's in your radiator, and it can start misreading. It can say it's cooler than it really is, which is unlikely. More than not, it says it's too hot, and it could be the gauge itself that is just getting the right voltage but isn't actually displaying it correctly. And of course, the workshop manual tells you the voltage that these sensors should be sending and all that, but a new thermostat sensor is tens of dollars, and again, not difficult to replace. The gauge is much more expensive, so definitely make sure that you thermometer the whole system to make sure that, actually it's running at temperature, but the gauge says it's hot before you start replacing the gauge. Certainly the multi-gauge ones on the series cars. But another place to look, don't just assume that the gauge is correct. I have a digital multi-gauge in the Defender that is separate to my dash gauge, and the dash gauge always reads consistently incorrect, whereas the actual
good to have some redundancy in
it's like an airplane. Everything is redundant. Well, again,
another gauge,
because we use the Defender as sort of a desert rally car, you have to it's just like, well, we're not going to stop because the heat gauge says it's too hot. We need to verify independently that the heat gauge is in fact too hot.
The earlier gauges have a capillary tube that run up to the cylinder head, and those tend to be perhaps a little more reliable than the later gauges, which rely on this electrical sending unit. But in either case, it's cheap insurance to get one of those infrared thermometers and check it for yourself, and then you'll know for sure.
In fact, many times they're one of the things that they give away free at Harbor Freight, which when you have one, you'll know that the temperature that's reading is probably not actually the temperature, because again, the thermometer is from Harbor Freight. So, maybe go ahead and
also useful in a pandemic to see if somebody's running a temperature.
Yeah, you can just you can shoot them as they're coming in the door and sort of be like, whoa, buddy, back it up. It's not that kind of party. Well, Ike, on that note, I'm off to Harbor Freight to get myself a couple more thermometers. It has been a slice as
get
always.
Some bed liner.
I'm gonna bed liner my thermometer. I think that's really the next step. And I'm going to put some checker plating on it as well, so that I've really got the ultimate tactical infrared thermometer. Get a little rail on there, put a scope on it, so I've got the most accurate readings humanly possible.
I can't wait to see it.
It's going to be amazing. All right, Ike. Well, thanks again for this week, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Looking forward to it.